And I call the member for Fairfax.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This budget, we feel, doesn't take the challenge up or take up the torch for what Australians really want to happen in our country at the moment. There are so many challenges which remain unanswered. The main issue facing Australians today is what Australians can do to regain Australia's status as a lucky country. Australians want to know, Australians need to know how their life can be better, how their life can be improved for them and their families. Not as we constantly hear in 30 years or 20 years' time, but right now. Domestic demand is at an all-time low, interest rates are at an all-time low, not because the economy is doing well, because there's no economic demand. Because our economy is spiralling down and shrinking, our people hold their savings in fear. We are all on struggle street together, and it's our country and it's our responsibility to do all we can to make the lives of all our citizens better. Since the last budget, Palm United team in Parliament has, as you've seen in this budget, stopped the co-payment, stopped changes to university, stopped $10 billion in cuts in social security, freed over 436 children from detention and 1,500 people from Christmas Island, assisted the government in resolving 30,000 cases in detention, and come up with the idea of the safe haven enterprise visas. We've moved in the Senate to save the low-income super for over 2 million Australians and kept the school kids bonus and kept low-income super. When the carbon tax was abolished, we ensured that electricity prices were reduced by 10% Australia-wide. We've moved 15 changes to direct action in the Senate, which all passed, and then we've passed direct action. And we've seen the results of our amendments and the recent announcements by the Minister for the Environment. We've saved the Climate Change Authority, saved the Clean Energy Corporation, saved ARENA, and we've helped set a new renewable energy target. We've fixed pensions for all veterans and ex-servicemen in accordance with our policy over 55, and we've seen the defeat of the Campbell-Newman government. During the course of Parliament, we've set up with the government three inquiries into trade, investment and growth, the Australian Fund, and more recently our inquiry into the Queensland Government. We've voted to abolish the carbon tax and abolish the mining tax, and we've recently introduced a bill on the foreign death penalty, protected maritime workers' jobs, proved that the government debt was not a problem for Australia, as we heard in the last budget, and we're happy that the Prime Minister adopted our policy once he was elected to ban lobbyists from party positions. We've introduced in the House of Representatives a private member's bill to kill off the GrainCorp takeover before the Treasurer made his decision, and in electoral reform we now see that pens are taking the place of pencils. We've voted in the Senate to keep Qantas in Australian own hands, and we've stopped changes to the income tax threshold and stopped financial incentive to sell public assets, saved Australian jobs offshore in the gas industry and stopped the slashing of university research grants. Australia is the only developed economy in the world to have recorded no annual recessions during the past 23 years, placing it alongside high-growth economies such as China and India. The Australian government debt is one of the lowest in the world. In its October 2014, the IMF estimated the Australian government's debt would be 16.6% of GDP in 2015, well below the 74.1% forecast for advanced economies. Actually, Australia's debt's only around 14% of GDP, less than the 40% under Bob Menzies' government, which many Liberals would say was a highlight of Australia's administration. Australia Pools under fund management is the third largest in the world and the largest in the Australian region. Growth in productivity is outpacing labour cost. Australia has enjoyed a sustained period of labour productivity growth exceeding the growth in real wages. Over 23 years, a compound annual growth rate of 1.8% in real unit labour costs have fallen by 0.05% each year. Strong labour productivity growth of 1.9% in 2012-13 and 2.6% in 2013-14. Real unit labour costs have broadly remained stable, and the effective cost of labour has remained in line with productivity improvements. You wouldn't believe that if you saw the rhetoric that goes on in this place. Australia is number one in the world in tertiary education entry rates. Australian entry rates to tertiary education is at 102%, including international students. This is well above the OECD average of 58%, and the USA 71%, and the UK 68%. Australia's tertiary education rate is also much higher than South Korea, 69%, and Japan at 52% and China at 18%. High rates in tertiary education underpin the position as Australia is the #1 developed country in terms of real GDP growth over the last 24 years. Australia is one of the most culturally diverse countries in the OECD. The availability of multilingual, culturally diverse and highly skilled personnel means Australia offers access to a workforce well equipped with cultural understanding in language and capabilities to service international business and its own languages. Australia has the second largest stock market in the Asian region. It's 8th largest in the world, with a total capital exceeding US $1.12 trillion. The Australian market capitalisation is greater than China's at $1.06 trillion and double Hong Kong's at $528 billion, around 4 times the capitalisation of the Singapore market. Australia's $1.6 trillion superannuation system is the 4th largest in the world and is a major driver behind Australia's globally significant funds management. The pool of assets is expected to grow to $7.6 trillion, or 180% of GDP over the next 2 decades. We shouldn't tamper with the pension. We don't need to. Our superannuation pool is strong and Australians are provided for their long-term retirement on their own efforts. This budget is flawed. Reducing company tax by 1.5% for small business will not stimulate this economy. Companies and small businesses have to make a profit before they make a tax. With such low-level demand in the economy, companies are not making a profit. Small businesses are not making a profit, so tax isn't relevant to them. Profit comes before you pay tax. Because of low demand and limited money supply, small businesses are losing profitability. We must create demand by increasing the money supply. People have to have money to buy goods and services for companies to make a profit before paying tax. Projected company tax receipts for 2015 exceed $70 billion. Instead of companies and businesses paying tax before they make a profit, the $70 billion should be left in enterprises' hands for another 12 months to boost the economy. Australians can spend it better than government, create real demand, massive job growth, wipe out deficits and make our economy stronger. $70 billion spent by an individual taxpayer gets the government 10% GST each time it's spent. We can have better hospitals, better schools and better services from our government. Money should be circulating in the economy, creating jobs and family enterprises. At the end of the year, the government gets the $70 billion tax as well. If money circulates 4 times a year before government gets it, it gets an extra $28 billion. It will cost around 2% at current interest rates. It will cost about $850 million to implement such a change, but provide an extra $21 billion or more of government revenue. This budget had the opportunity but failed to stimulate our construction sector. We need to make the first $10,000 paid on a home loan each year tax deductible. Australia needs to have the dream again of home ownership. We can boost the construction industry, increase home ownership to satisfy demand and increase revenue for the government. By growing demand, the government revenue, we could have the opportunity to reduce tax for 15% for all Australians. The Australian taxpayer would have an extra $2,500 in their pocket every year, or $50 a week. This increase in demand and activity could boost jobs and investment in small business, and it's opportunity which has been lost by this budget. We need to stimulate our economy. We know our citizens can spend money better than the government can. We see the budget and the government support needs to support the states. Attempts to privatise our schools, our hospitals and turn people away were rejected by the people of Queensland at the recent state election, and they'll be rejected at the next federal election if the government continues with that policy. We need to stimulate our economy as President Obama has done in the United States. Europe is stimulating its economy now, and we have to act rather than follow the example set by Greece of constant contraction in the economy and reduction in our fundamental demand level. The cost of health care in the United States is 17% of GDP. Still 60 million Americans are not covered. In Australia, the government spends around 9% on health care and complains that they want to make more cuts in the forthcoming years. We cannot desert the sick and dying. In the days of Prime Minister Menzies, our debts were around 40% of GDP, which would still only make us 60% of the OECD average. We need to use these ability we've got to generate more capital and more demand to push our economy to even greater heights than we are today. We must do whatever needed to be done to fix health once and for all. The Australian government is the main petitioner of bankruptcy and company liquidations across Australia. As companies close, employees lose their jobs, the government loses group tax, and people are transferred from gainful employment to Centrelink. Company taxes are destroyed, services spiral down. Government must stop driving businesses to the wall. We must keep the system going to keep people employed productively. To transfer people from gainful employment to unemployment just guarantees misery. We need a Chapter 11 like they have in the United States, where when companies fail, the business continues. So families keep their jobs, government keeps their taxes, and the nation keeps its exports. As it's been said, ignorance and illiteracy and unskilled workers and school dropouts, these are the failures of an education system in the past that breed failures in our social and economic system, such as delinquency, unemployment, chronic dependency, a waste of human resources, a loss of productive power and purchasing, and an increase in tax-supported benefits. The loss of only 1 year's income due to unemployment is more than the total cost of education through 12 years to high school. Failure to improve our education performance is not only poor social policy, it's poor economic policy. We need to invest at this time, and the government hasn't done it enough in this budget, in ourselves. If we don't have confidence in ourselves, we'll have confidence in us. We must educate our children as our most valuable resource. The problems we have been made by Australians, they can be solved by Australians as well. So we need to attack the issue of confidence to show leadership and vision for this country. We need to support regional Australia, and the government had a great opportunity to introduce regional zonal taxation, but missed it in this budget. Japan has become the world's third largest economy by processing Australian resources, and the cost of energy in Japan is more expensive. And in Japan, it suffers from the tyranny of distance, its wages are higher, yet Australia sells its mineral resources at $40 to $100 a tonne to Japan. They process them and sell them for $20,000, creating exports and an economic powerhouse for Japan, while Australians in South Australia, Victoria, Tasmania, New South Wales and Queensland, and even Western Australia, go without any hope for themselves. Minerals from Western Australia and Queensland should be processed in New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania and Australia, and let Australians do what they can do best, using our natural advantages in the world so that we can provide real competition on a massive scale. No longer should we give up the future of our children in this country to the opportunities that we have to countries in Asia and north of us. Some of those resources can be processed in this country. And because of the high cost of establishing plants like this, $6 or $7 billion or more, the Japanese government has learned, the Chinese government has learned, and the Korean government has learned that it requires government leadership and innovation to make this happen. Yet our government has done nothing in this area for over 30 years. And we've lost these opportunities in Asia. And we see declining unemployment in places like Tasmania and other places. We have to grasp a nettle and realise that there's a real opportunity in the future to process our resources in this country, to return Australia to a large, highly skilled, technological manufactured base. This is an opportunity that could have been addressed in this budget, as could have the Chapter 11 provisions, which weren't. There are opportunities lost and forgone for Australians. And I think it's a matter of great regret. We can only look to the future and hope the government in next year's budget will look at some of these things that they could have done today.